Tonight, in front of 300 people, the man she built her life around dropped to one knee for her sister. Some betrayals don't arrive like a storm. They arrive like a slow poison, administered by the people who smile at your table, sleep under your roof, and whisper your name like they love you. Nia Bennett had been drinking that poison for 6 months. She just never let anyone see her swallow it. If you've ever been destroyed by someone you trusted completely, stay with me. Like this video, drop your city in the comments and let me see how far this story travels. Because what Nia does next, nobody saw coming. The mirror in Suite 1407 of the Langham, Chicago, did not lie. Nia Bennett stood in front of it for 11 minutes without moving. She had counted. Counting was something she did when the alternative was screaming, and screaming was something she had not allowed herself in 6 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. Not since the Tuesday afternoon she had opened Adrian's second phone, the one he kept in the inside pocket of his gym bag, the pocket he thought she didn't know about, and seen the thread of messages that rearranged every memory she had of the last 3 years. The dress she wore tonight was deep burgundy, structured, no excess fabric, no apology in the cut. She had chosen it 3 weeks ago with the specific knowledge of what this evening was going to become, and she had chosen it the way a surgeon chooses a scalpel, precisely, without sentiment. Her reflection looked back at her. 34 years old, cheekbones that her father used to say could cut glass, eyes that people consistently misread as cold when they were simply focused. She was 5'8" in heels, the daughter of Lawrence Bennett, who had built a construction and real estate empire from a single lot in southwest Atlanta and turned it into a portfolio worth north of $40 million before a heart attack took him at 59. She was the founder and CEO of Nia B. Creative Group, a brand strategy and lifestyle company. She had grown from a kitchen table operation into a firm with clients in 12 cities. She had built everything she owned with her own 2 hands, her own money, and her own name. And for 5 years, she had also been Adrian Cole's wife. She picked up her clutch from the marble vanity. Inside, her phone, her lipstick, a folded envelope containing a USB drive, and a printed summary of 14 pages of documentation she had assembled over the past half year with the kind of methodical patience that surprised even herself. She was not a vengeful woman by nature. She was a precise one. There was a difference, and tonight that difference was going to matter enormously. She took one breath, let it out slow. Then she went downstairs. The gala occupied the entire ballroom of the Drake Hotel, 12 blocks away. The event had been organized under the cover of a charity fundraiser for youth arts programs. Adrian's idea, because Adrian understood optics the way a parasite understands a host, completely, instinctively, with zero concern for the damage it caused. 300 guests, business contacts, city officials, old money from the Gold Coast, new money from the tech corridor, journalists who'd been invited because their presence guaranteed coverage. It was the kind of room Adrian Cole loved more than he had ever loved any person in it. The car service dropped her at the entrance at 7:42. She walked in alone. Heads turned. They always did. Nia Bennett entering a room was not a subtle event, and she had long since made peace with that fact. She moved through the lobby with the unhurried deliberateness of a woman who had nowhere to be and everywhere to go simultaneously, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing tray, and did not drink it. She found her table without assistance. Third from the stage, center aisle, full sightline to the podium. Adrian had arranged the seating himself, which meant he had arranged it for maximum theater. She sat down, set her clutch in her lap, and began watching the room the way her father had taught her to watch a negotiation. Not the faces, but the patterns. Who moved toward whom? Who avoided eye contact with whom? Who kept checking their phone? Simone arrived at 8:15 with Adrian. Her sister was 29 years old, 5 years younger than Nia, and had spent most of those 29 years in the comfortable shadow of being Lawrence Bennett's overlooked daughter. Where Nia had inherited their father's discipline and their mother's ambition, Simone had inherited something harder to categorize, a kind of effortless social gravity, the ability to make any room feel like it had been waiting for her. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown that Nia recognized immediately as one she had admired in a boutique window on Michigan Avenue 2 months ago and mentioned in passing to Adrian. Of course, Adrian Cole was 41, broad-shouldered, with the easy handsomeness of a man who had always been told he was exceptional and had simply believed it. He wore a tuxedo the way wealthy men wore tuxedos, like it was a costume and also like it was his skin. He had his hand at the small of Simone's back as they entered, and his eyes swept the room in that proprietary way of his, cataloging the faces, calculating the impressions. When his gaze landed on Nia, it flickered, just for a second. Then his jaw set, and he smiled. That smile. She had spent 5 years believing that smile was hers. She smiled back, held it long enough to watch the flicker of uncertainty move across his eyes. Then she looked away, very calmly, and took a sip of champagne. Across the room, she watched Simone lean in and whisper something in Adrian's ear. He shook his head slightly. The two of them parted, Adrian heading toward a cluster of business contacts near the bar, Simone drifting toward a group of women Nia vaguely recognized from the social circuit. None of them approached Nia's table. That was by design. Adrian had already managed the room before she arrived. He was good at this. She gave him that. Dinner was served at 8:30. 7 courses. Because Adrian didn't understand the word sufficient. The conversation at Nia's table was polished and empty. A city alderman talking about infrastructure, a hedge fund manager's wife talking about a recent trip to the Amalfi Coast, a gallery owner making calculated remarks about the art market. Nia participated just enough to be present and just little enough to be mysterious. She ate almost nothing. The food tasted like anticipation. Somewhere between the 4th and 5th course, her phone buzzed once in her clutch. She looked at the screen under the table. On my way, 10 minutes. She put the phone away and said nothing. The message was from a contact she had acquired through an exceptionally unusual chain of events that had begun 4 months ago when a mutual acquaintance, a Korean-American corporate attorney named David Choi, had introduced her to a man named Kang Min-jae at a private dinner in New York. Choi had described Min-jae vaguely as an investor with diverse interests. That description had the same accuracy as describing a hurricane as some wind. Kang Min-jae was 29 years old, educated at LSE and Columbia, and ran what could loosely be called a private intelligence and financial consulting operation out of offices in Seoul, Singapore, and a floor of a building in River North that had no visible signage. He also, Nia had learned through her own research, held significant authority within a network of Korean organized crime interests that his family had controlled for 2 generations. She had gone to dinner with him out of curiosity. She had called him 2 weeks later out of necessity. By the time she had explained what she'd found on Adrian's phone, not just the affair, but the financial transfers, the account discrepancies, the documentation that didn't add up no matter how many times she ran the numbers, Min-jae had listened in complete silence, asked 4 specific questions, and then said quietly that he would need 3 months. That had been 3 months ago. At 9:17, the room's energy shifted. Nia felt it before she saw the cause. A subtle alteration in the ambient noise level, conversations tapering, the particular hesitation that moves through a crowd when something has entered that it doesn't know how to categorize. She turned her head toward the ballroom entrance and saw Kang Min-jae standing just inside the doorway. He was not a physically imposing man in the conventional sense. He was lean and of average height, dressed in a suit that was almost aggressively understated, charcoal gray, no pocket square, no tie pin. But there was something in his bearing, in the precise stillness of the way he occupied space, that made everyone in his immediate vicinity take a half step back without appearing to notice they were doing it. He stood there for exactly long enough to let the room register him, and then he began moving through the crowd. Several men recognized him. Nia watched it happen in sequence. A private equity contact of Adrian's going very still, a city official whose name she didn't know suddenly finding something urgent to study on his phone, a Korean-American businessman near the back of the room performing a controlled 180-degree turn and walking directly toward the far exit. Min-jae reached her table, pulled out the empty chair to her left, and sat down. He did not say hello. He set his phone face down on the table, accepted a glass of water from a passing server, and looked toward the stage with the expression of a man attending a presentation he expected to find moderately informative. "How are you holding up?" he said. Not a question, more like calibration. "Fine," Nia said. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry." He picked up the dinner program from beside his place setting and glanced at it. He's going to do it during the remarks, after the charity portion. She knew. She had known for 2 weeks, ever since Min Jae's people had intercepted a text exchange between Adrian and his event coordinator, confirming the proposal logistics. She had known, and she had sat with that knowledge for 14 days, and she had made her decisions. "Is everything in place?" she said. "Yes. All of it. All of it." He set the program down. "The financial documentation has been packaged and distributed to 3 journalists in this room. They have it on embargo. It goes live the moment you give the word. And the other thing," a pause. "That part is more complicated." She looked at him directly for the first time since he'd sat down. Min Jae met her gaze with the same flat calm he brought to every interaction, a composure that she had initially read as coldness and had since understood as something different: discipline, the kind forged under pressures she had only begun to understand. "How complicated?" she said. Complicated enough that I need to talk to you about it tonight, after." She held his gaze for another second, then looked back toward the stage where Adrian had begun moving toward the podium. "After," she agreed. Adrian Cole was a gifted public speaker. She had always recognized that, even now. He had the particular talent of making a room of 300 people feel like he was addressing each of them personally, a combination of vocal warmth, practiced eye contact, and the strategic deployment of just enough vulnerability to seem trustworthy. He spoke for 12 minutes about the Youth Arts Initiative, about community investment, about the city of Chicago, and what it meant to build something lasting in a place with that kind of weight and history. Nia watched the room while he spoke. Watched them lean in, watched them smile and nod and feel moved. This was the machine she had been a part of. This beautiful, functional performance of integrity. She had believed it once. She had built her life inside it. She was done building inside other people's structures. Adrian reached the end of his prepared remarks. There was applause. Then he paused, and his expression shifted into something more personal, a slight smile, a dip of the head that telegraphed emotion incoming. "Before I leave this stage," he said, "there's something I have to say, something I should have said a long time ago." The room quieted instinctively. Nia felt the woman to her right lean forward slightly. Adrian descended from the stage. He moved through the crowd with that easy confidence, and the crowd parted for him the way crowds parted for men who had learned that crowds always would. He walked toward the table where Simone was seated. Nia watched her sister's face go through a rapid sequence she would remember for the rest of her life. Confusion, realization, panic, and then, because Simone Bennett had always been susceptible to the particular gravity of being chosen, something that looked heartbreakingly like joy. Adrian reached into his jacket, pulled out a ring box, went down on one knee. The room went absolutely still. "Simone," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, his voice carrying the practiced emotion of a man who had rehearsed this precise cadence. "I married the wrong woman. I've known it for years, and I'm done pretending otherwise." 300 people held their breath. Every head in the room turned toward Nia Bennett. She felt them all. Every gaze, every held breath, every person who had come here tonight expecting nothing more consequential than overpriced salmon and charity speeches, and was now getting something they would be talking about for the next 3 years. She felt the weight of their collective anticipation pressing against her chest, their hunger for her reaction, the tears, the breakdown, the spectacular public disintegration of a woman who had just been told, in front of everyone she knew, that she was not enough. She let them wait exactly 4 seconds. Then she smiled. It was not a performance. It was not bravado. It was the expression of a woman who had known this moment was coming for 6 months and had spent every one of those months making absolutely certain that when it arrived, she would be the one holding the detonator. She reached for her champagne glass, lifted it slightly in the direction of the stage in a gesture that the room could not quite interpret, and set it back down. Then the ballroom doors opened behind her, and everything changed. Min Jae did not move from his seat. He didn't need to. The simple fact of his presence, a man that a significant number of people in that room recognized and feared, sitting calmly beside Nia Bennett while her husband proposed to her sister, was doing the work without any additional performance. Nia watched Adrian's confidence fracture in real time, watched his eyes move from Simone to the doorway to Min Jae to Nia and back again, the calculation happening visibly behind his face as he tried to understand what piece of the board he was missing. He was missing most of the board. Simone said yes. Of course she did. Her voice was barely audible, and Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly less ceremony than he'd planned. The moment had been contaminated by something he couldn't name, and his instincts were telling him something he didn't want to hear. Scattered applause moved through the room, uncertain. Nobody was sure what the correct response was to applauding a man who had just proposed to his sister-in-law in front of his wife and 300 witnesses. Adrian stood. Simone stood beside him, and Nia could see her sister's hand shaking slightly where she held it against her chest to look at the ring. Simone would not meet Nia's eyes. She hadn't met them all evening. Whatever Simone had told herself about this moment, whatever narrative she had constructed to make it acceptable, it was fracturing too now, under the reality of 300 people watching and Nia Bennett not breaking. The applause died out. Adrian straightened his jacket. He was recovering. She could see him doing it, pulling his professional composure back around himself like armor. He started to move back toward the stage. Nia stood up. The sound of her chair pushing back was not loud, but in a room that had gone that quiet, it didn't need to be. 300 people watched Nia Bennett rise from her table, set her clutch down deliberately, and smooth the front of her burgundy dress with both hands. She did not reach for a microphone. Her voice, when she spoke, carried on its own. Her father's voice, she had always been told, the voice of a man who could fill a construction site or a boardroom with equal authority. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she said. "It's been a very educational evening." She reached into her clutch and removed the folded envelope. "6 months ago, I started noticing some inconsistencies." She moved toward the stage without hurry. "Inconsistencies in my husband's schedule, in our shared finances, in the way my sister stopped being able to look at me." She stepped up onto the platform and turned to face the room. "I'm a brand strategist by profession. I understand narrative. I understand how stories are built and how they're protected. And when I started pulling at the threads of this particular story, I couldn't stop." She opened the envelope, removed the USB drive, and held it up, then set it on the podium. "What's on this drive is a summary," she said. "The full documentation has already been provided to 3 journalists in this room. What it contains is not complicated. It contains hotel receipts from 14 different properties across 5 cities over the past 22 months. It contains bank transfer records totaling approximately $800,000 moved through accounts my husband controls to accounts held in my sister's name. It contains text message transcripts because my husband uses the same cloud backup system we set up together 3 years ago and changed the password for everything except that." The silence in the room had achieved a different quality now. The stunned, voyeuristic silence of people watching something they had not expected and could not look away from. Nia looked at Adrian. He had stopped moving. His face had gone through several phases and had arrived somewhere past shock and into something colder and more dangerous. Simone was standing with her new ring on her finger and both hands pressed flat against her own stomach, like she was trying to hold herself together from the outside. "I'm not here tonight to perform heartbreak," Nia said. "I'm not going to cry, and I'm not going to beg, and I'm not going to pretend that what just happened on that dance floor is the most important thing that happened in this building tonight." She paused. "Because it isn't." She looked back at Min-jae. He met her gaze and gave a single nod. She turned back to the room. "The affair is actually the least interesting part of what I found." That landed. She watched it move through the crowd like a current. "What I actually found," she continued, "when I started digging past the hotel receipts and the text messages, was a pattern. Financial transfers through accounts that my husband controls, flowing into shell corporations that have no visible connection to anyone in this room. But they do have a connection." She paused. "They connect to money that belonged to my father." The room had gone so quiet she could hear the ventilation system. "Lawrence Bennett died 4 years ago," she said. "He left behind an estate, trusts, assets, a family legacy that was supposed to be protected. What I found suggests that legacy has been systematically dismantled for years through structures that were specifically designed to be invisible." She picked up the USB drive and closed her hand around it. "The full picture of how and why and who is in this documentation, and that full picture is considerably larger than a cheating husband and a disloyal sister. Ichai, boss." She stepped down from the stage. She walked back to her table, picked up her clutch, and looked at Min-jae. I'm ready, she said. He rose from his seat. Together, in front of 300 frozen witnesses, they walked toward the exit. At the door, she stopped, turned back one more time. Adrian was still standing near the dance floor. His jaw was rigid, his phone already in his hand. She could see him calculating, trying to figure out who to call first, what the play was from here. Simone had sat back down. The ring was still on her finger. She was staring at the table. Their mother, Vanessa Bennett, was seated at a corner table that Nia hadn't registered when she arrived. Her mother always positioned herself at the edges of rooms she controlled. Vanessa's expression was perfectly composed. She was holding a wine glass and not drinking from it, and watching her oldest daughter with the specific stillness of someone who has just realized that a plan they thought was airtight has developed an unexpected leak. Nia held her mother's gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she walked out. The November air hit her like cold water. Behind her, she could already hear the ballroom erupting. The sound of 300 people simultaneously starting to talk at once. The particular roar of a room where something has just detonated, and everyone is trying to figure out how close they were to the blast radius. Min Jae appeared beside her on the sidewalk. His car was already waiting. A black vehicle with no markings, a driver who hadn't reacted to anything. The third journalist, Nia said as they moved toward the car. She's going to want a statement tonight. I know, he said. I'm not giving one. I know that too. She stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face him. You said there's something more complicated. You said you need to talk to me about it tonight. Min Jae looked at her steadily. In the orange light from the hotel entrance, his expression was difficult to read, which, she had learned, was not indifference, but rather the face of a man who understood that the information he was carrying had weight and was choosing his moment carefully. Get in the car, he said. What I have to show you is not a conversation for a sidewalk. She looked at him for another second. The cold air moved between them. Somewhere behind the hotel doors, she could still hear the noise of the room she had just detonated. She got in the car. Min Jae slid in beside her, and the door closed. The driver moved into traffic without being told. Outside, the lights of Chicago streaked past the windows in long amber lines. My father's death, Nia said. It was not a question. Min Jae was silent for a moment. Yes. She stared straight ahead at the glass partition separating them from the driver. Her hands were in her lap, very still, the clutch balanced across her knees. She could feel the change in the air, the specific pressure drop of a revelation approaching, the way a body instinctively braces before impact, even when the mind hasn't caught up yet. Tell me, she said. Not in the car, he said. When we get upstairs. Min Jae, Naya. His voice was even, not hard, careful. The voice of someone who has delivered catastrophic information before and has learned that the delivery matters. What I found is not something you process in the back of a moving car. Give me 20 minutes. She pressed her lips together, looked out the window at the city, the river cutting its dark line through the illuminated grid, the towers rising against a cloud-heavy sky, the millions of people sleeping or working or living inside all of it, entirely unaware that somewhere in a ballroom on Michigan Avenue, a woman had just dismantled 5 years of lies in 12 minutes and was now riding through the dark toward a truth that she understood, somewhere below conscious thought, was going to be the hardest thing she had ever held. She had built her entire adult life on the assumption that her father's death was simply what it appeared to be. A heart attack, sudden and brutal. The kind that took physically active men in their late 50s with no warning and no cause anyone could have prevented. She had grieved it as such, privately, the way she grieved most things, with the specific controlled devastation of a woman who could not afford to fall apart, and so learned instead to carry the weight in silence until it became part of her structure. If that assumption was wrong, if something had been done to Lawrence Bennett, she didn't finish the thought. Not yet. The car stopped in front of a building on Walker Drive. No signage. A doorman who nodded at Min Jae and said nothing. They rode the elevator to the 43rd floor in silence. The apartment, if it could be called that, occupied the entire floor and looked north toward the dark expanse of Lake Michigan, the water lost in the November night, the horizon invisible. The interior was spare and expensive in the particular way of spaces that are not meant to be lived in but to be worked in. Long tables covered in papers and screens, A server rack in a windowed alcove, the low hum of machines processing information. Two men Nia had seen before, Min Jae's associates, names she had never been offered, were working at separate stations and did not look up when they entered. Min Jae crossed the room to a table where a folder waited, thick and closed, and set his hand on top of it. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." He looked at her for a moment. "All right." He opened the folder. The first document was a medical examiner's addendum, a follow-up report filed 14 months after Lawrence Bennett's death and subsequently sealed. Nia looked at it without touching it. Her father's name. The date. A case number she had never seen. The original cause of death was myocardial infarction, Min Jae said. That report was accurate as far as it went. But there was a toxicology request filed by a junior examiner that was, he paused, administratively closed before the results were processed. Nia's throat tightened. By whom? That's what's in here. He moved to the next page. A transfer record. Money moving from an account she didn't recognize into an account registered to a Riverside County Medical Administrative Office. The amount is not large, $42,000. Enough to make a problem disappear quietly, not enough to leave a visible trail. She was looking at the transfer record without seeing it. Her vision had narrowed to a single point. The account this came from, she said. Her voice was steady. She was very proud of that in some distant part of herself. Where does it trace back to? Min Jae was quiet for a moment. A holding company registered in the Cayman Islands, he said, which traces back to a trust structure administered out of Hong Kong, which connects, through 3 additional layers, to a name. He paused. A name that also appears, repeatedly, in the financial records from the Bennett family estate. Behind the shell corporations, behind the account transfers. He looked at her directly. A name that Adrian Cole's offshore accounts are also connected to. The room was very still. Tell me the name, Nia said. Min Jae held her gaze. In his eyes there was not apology exactly, but something adjacent to it. The recognition that he was about to hand someone a piece of information that would permanently divide her life into before and after. Marcus Holloway, he said. Nia went completely still. Marcus Holloway. Her father's oldest friend, his college roommate, his first business partner, the man who had delivered the eulogy at Lawrence Bennett's funeral and wept at the podium with a grief so genuine that Nia had held his arm afterward and told him her father had loved him. The man who had helped manage the Bennett estate during the disorienting year after Lawrence's death, who had navigated the legal complexity with patient expertise, who had sat at Vanessa Bennett's kitchen table every Sunday for 3 months and helped her understand the documents. That name. Outside, 43 floors below, the city moved on its ordinary rhythms. The river. The traffic. The millions of ordinary events composing a November night in Chicago. Inside, something settled into place in Nia Bennett's chest. Not peace, not acceptance, but the specific terrible clarity of a woman who has just seen the shape of the thing she has been fighting without knowing it, and understood for the first time exactly how large it is. How long, she said. Her voice was very quiet. 14 years, Min Jae said. At minimum. 14 years. Her father had been dead for 4, which meant Marcus Holloway had been building this while Lawrence Bennett was still alive. Which meant, he knew, she said. My father. He found out. Min Jae did not answer immediately. He looked at the folder, then he looked at her. That, he said, is what we have to find out next. The folder stayed open on the table between them. Nia did not move for a long time. She stood with her hands at her sides and looked at Marcus Holloway's name printed on a transfer document and felt the specific physical sensation of the ground shifting beneath a life she had believed was solid. Not metaphorically. Literally. A tightening in her legs, a subtle loss of equilibrium, the body responding to information before the mind had finished processing it. Min Jae did not rush her. He moved to the far side of the room and poured 2 glasses of water from a carafe on the side table and set one near her without comment. His associates continued working at their stations, the low sound of keyboards and the occasional murmur of a phone call conducted in Korean. She picked up the water, drank half of it, set it down. Walk me through the timeline, she said. He came back to the table. How far back do you want to go? As far as it goes. He turned to the third page in the folder, a timeline printed in clean columns, dates, transactions, corporate registrations. She had seen documents like this before in due diligence work she'd done for client acquisitions. The structure was familiar. The names in it were not. Marcus Holloway and your father met at Morehouse in 1984, Minjay said. Business partners from 1991. The first shell company that connects to Holloway appears in 1998. At that point, your father's construction firm had been operating for 6 years and was beginning to take on significant municipal contracts. He moved his finger down the column. The shell company, registered in Delaware, subsequently moved offshore, received its first meaningful transfer in 2002, 11 years before your father died. He was stealing from the business. Redirecting is the more precise word. Small percentages of contract revenues routed through subcontractor invoices that billed for work that was partially or never performed, enough to be invisible in routine accounting, not enough to flag an audit. She looked at the figures. 11 years of small percentages. The number was not small anymore. My father had an accountant, she said. He had a CFO, both of whom, Minjay said, received payments from accounts connected to the same holding structure. Not large payments, enough. She absorbed this. My father trusted Marcus with everything, with the books, with the legal structure, she stopped, with his estate planning. Yes. So when he died, Holloway was already inside every layer of the financial architecture. He had been for over a decade. The estate went through probate in a way that your family's attorneys described as smooth and well-organized. A pause. It was smooth because Holloway had spent years making sure the pieces were already in position. Nia put both hands flat on the table and leaned on them. The surface was cool. She concentrated on that. And Adrian, she said, Adrian Cole married you 2 years after your father's death. By that point, Holloway had already transitioned the primary asset structures out of the Bennett estate into the offshore network. What remained, the visible assets, the properties, the investment accounts your mother controlled, were real but represented approximately 30% of what your father's estate should have contained. He paused. Adrian's role was to manage the remaining 30%, to keep it stable, to keep your mother comfortable, and to ensure that you, specifically you, never looked too closely at the numbers. She stood up straight. You're telling me Adrian knew. I'm telling you Adrian was paid to know certain things and not others. Whether he understood the full scope, Minjay set down the document. I don't believe he did. He's not sophisticated enough. Holloway uses people who know just enough to be useful and not enough to be dangerous. She thought about Adrian at the podium tonight, the easy confidence, the way he'd looked at her when his gaze flickered. Not guilt, she realized now. Calculation. He had always been calculating, always positioning, and she had spent 5 years believing the position he was taking was beside her. Simone, she said. Minjay was quiet for a moment. Your sister has been in a relationship with Adrian Cole for 22 months. Based on the communications we've recovered, she believes the affair is entirely personal. She doesn't know about the financial structure. Does she know about Holloway? No. Nia moved away from the table. She walked to the window and looked north at the dark water. The lake was invisible in the November night. She could only tell it was there by the absence of lights at the horizon, the vast black gap where the city's grid simply ended. Simone. 29 years old. The baby sister who had grown up underneath the specific weight of being second to Nia's accomplishments, second to their father's attention, second to the version of the Bennett name that Nia had inherited and built. Nia had watched that secondness shape Simone into someone who was always slightly angled toward the nearest available source of warmth, someone for whom being chosen was a need so fundamental it operated below conscious thought. Adrian had chosen her, and Simone, who had spent her whole life being the one who wasn't chosen first, had let herself be swallowed by it. Nia pressed her fingertips against the cold glass. She was not going to feel sorry for Simone. Not tonight. Maybe not for a long time. But she needed to understand what Simone actually knew. I need to talk to her, she said. That's inadvisable right now. I didn't ask for your advice on the timing. Minjay's reflection was visible in the glass behind her. He had his arms at his sides and was watching her with that particular stillness of his. Adrian is going to reach her before you do. He's already making calls. My people are monitoring his communications. He knows tonight went sideways and he's managing the narrative. What narrative does he have left? He'll tell Simone that you orchestrated the entire evening as a public humiliation, that the financial documentation is fabricated or taken out of context, that you've always been threatened by their relationship and this is your way of destroying it. He paused. He's actually good at this. I want you to understand that. He is genuinely skilled at making the most self-serving version of events sound like the reasonable interpretation. Nia turned from the window. She'll believe him. She might, for a while. He met her eyes. Which is why the conversation you need to have with your sister is not tonight's conversation. Tonight you'd be operating on adrenaline and residual anger, and she'd be operating on Adrian's framing, and it would become exactly the confrontation he wants. The two of you against each other, which is a dynamic he knows how to manage. She looked at him for a long moment. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this for 3 months. She crossed back to the table, sat down finally, in the chair across from him, and let the exhaustion of the evening settle into her legs. The clock on the wall read 11:47. 4 hours ago, she had been standing in a hotel mirror telling herself she was ready. She had been ready. She still was. But readiness was not the same as not being tired, and she was very tired. What's the immediate threat, she said. Right now. Tonight. Min-jae sat down across from her. Marcus Holloway knows the documentation has been distributed to journalists. I don't know how quickly that information reaches him. It depends on who in this city he has watching. But my estimate is that by morning, he'll know that someone has been inside his financial structure. Will he run? Not immediately. He's been careful for 14 years. His first instinct will be to assess the damage and look for the source. A pause. The source is me. He'll figure that out within 48 hours. Is that a problem for you? Min-jae tilted his head very slightly. Holloway and I have overlapping interests in several markets. We are not friends. We are also not enemies, historically. What I've done tonight will change that calculation. She watched him. You knew that when you agreed to help me. Yes. Why? He looked at her steadily. Because what was done to your family was a specific kind of wrong that I have particular feelings about. He said it without elaboration, and she understood that the elaboration was not forthcoming. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Min-jae carried his reasons the way he carried everything else. Close, controlled, visible only when he chose to make them visible. She didn't push it. Okay, she said. What do we do tomorrow? He opened a second folder she hadn't noticed at the edge of the table. They worked until 3 in the morning. She left the building alone. Min-jae had offered a car and she had declined. She needed the cold air, and the 20-minute walk back to the Langham needed the city's ordinary hostility, the wind off the river, and the indifferent noise of late-night traffic. She walked with her clutch under her arm and her coat buttoned and her mind moving at a pace that her legs couldn't match. By the time she reached the hotel, 3 things had become clear. First, the journalists had the documentation. By morning, it would be processed. By afternoon, it would be published. Whatever Adrian and Holloway planned to do in response, they would be doing it in public. Second, the medical examiner's addendum regarding her father's death was sealed but not destroyed. There was a path to unsealing it. It required a specific legal motion and a specific judge in approximately 30 days. They had the path mapped. Third, somewhere into the network of shell corporations that Marcus Holloway had spent 14 years constructing, there was a piece of original documentation that predated the offshore restructuring, a founding document, something with actual signatures on actual paper from a time when Holloway was still operating domestically and hadn't yet built the layers of insulation that currently surrounded him. If that document existed, and Min-jae believed it did, it would be in one of 2 places, a private vault facility in the Loop, or Holloway's personal residence in Kenilworth. They needed that document before Holloway had time to destroy it. 30 days was not 30 days anymore. She rode the elevator to the 14th floor and let herself into the suite that she had inhabited for 3 nights as a specific preparation for tonight. She had not slept in the house she shared with Adrian since the week she had confirmed the affair, had told him only that she needed space for work, and had watched him accept this without question, with the specific relief of a man who did not want to be watched closely. She sat on the edge of the bed without removing her coat. Her phone had been vibrating intermittently since she left the Drake Hotel. 12 missed calls, most of them from numbers she recognized. Her publicist, 2 business contacts, a college friend who had presumably been tipped off about the evening's events through the social media circuit that processed Chicago gossip in real time. 1 call from her mother, no voicemail. 1 call from Adrian. At 11:03, lasting 0 seconds. He'd hung up before it connected. 1 text from a number she didn't recognize, received at 11:58. 11 digits, no name. It read, "We should speak. I know more than you think." She stared at it. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response. She set the phone face up on the bedside table and looked at it for a while, then looked at the ceiling, then closed her eyes. The room was quiet. The refrigerated air moved through the vents. Somewhere below, 40 stories of hotel went on being a hotel. Rooms and corridors and the small private dramas of strangers. She thought about her father. Lawrence Bennett at his best had been a man whose physical presence in a room seemed to reorganize it. Not through loudness or performance, but through a quality of attention, of seeing things and people clearly that made the room sharper just by virtue of him being in it. He had built his business on that quality. He had raised Nia on it. He had told her, when she was 11 years old and had been excluded from a group project at school by 3 girls who thought her intensity was threatening, "Baby, the people who can't handle your focus are always going to call it a problem. Don't make it one." She had carried that for 23 years. He had spent the last years of his life being quietly stolen from by his oldest friend, and she had not known, and she was not going to let that be the last chapter. She was still in her coat when she fell asleep. The call came at 6:44 in the morning. She was awake immediately. She had always been a light sleeper, and the last several months had calibrated her nervous system to a level of alertness that was exhausting to maintain and impossible to turn off. She grabbed the phone before the second ring. Min Jae. "Talk to me," she said. "Holloway knows." His voice was even, but there was a tension underneath it she hadn't heard before. "He was at a private dinner in Kenilworth last night with 2 of the city's federal prosecutors. We didn't have eyes on that meeting, but one of my people has a contact in that circle, and what we're hearing is that Holloway moved first. He went to the prosecutors before the journalists went public." Her stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means he's attempting to frame the narrative with federal law enforcement before the press shapes it. He's positioning himself as a whistleblower, as a victim of a financial conspiracy involving, a pause, your father's estate. That's insane. It's smart, Min Jae said. He's had 14 years to prepare a version of events in which he is the aggrieved party. A trusted business associate who discovered financial irregularities, who has been sitting on evidence of malfeasance out of loyalty to a dead friend's memory, who has been reluctant to come forward. Another pause. He's going to say your father was the architect of the fraud, and that he, Holloway, has been trying to protect the family from that truth. The silence that followed was absolute. Nia sat on the edge of the bed in her wrinkled burgundy dress and her unbuttoned coat and held the phone against her ear and said nothing. "Nia, I'm here. I know what you're thinking. Then you know I need about 30 seconds. She counted them out, slow. The way she counted when screaming was the alternative. Lawrence Bennett, her father. Being named by his oldest friend in a federal prosecutor's office before 6 in the morning as the criminal. The audacity of it was so enormous it briefly stopped being outrageous and became something close to abstract. A structure, a calculation. A move made by a man who had spent 14 years planning for every contingency, including this one. "The founding document," she said. "The one in Kenilworth or the Loop Vault?" "Yes." "We need it today." "I know. Can you get it?" A pause. Not hesitation. Assessment. She had learned to read the difference. The vault facility requires a legal instrument. That's a 48-hour process minimum. Kenilworth. Another pause. Kenilworth is faster, but it carries different risks. She understood what different risks meant in the vocabulary of Kang Min Jae. How different? Significant. Can your people handle significant? "That's not the question," he said. "The question is whether you want to operate that way. Once we move on his property, this is no longer a legal and strategic operation. It becomes something else." She stood up, walked to the window. The morning had arrived gray and flat over the city, low clouds pressing down on the skyline, the lake a smear of iron at the edge of the grid. Her father's name was being dismantled in a federal building 12 blocks from where she was standing. "Do it," she said. Silence. "Min Jae? I heard you." His voice had changed slightly, something settling into place, a gear engaging. "There's one more thing." She waited. "The text you received last night, the unknown number." She went very still. "You know about that." "I sent it." She pulled the phone from her ear and stared at it for a second, then brought it back. "Explain." "There's a piece of this I haven't told you yet," he said. "I didn't tell you last night because you were already at capacity and because I needed to verify it independently before I brought it to you." A beat. "I've verified it." The cold from the window glass was moving through the air against her face. She pressed her free hand flat against her sternum, a habit she'd developed in the last 6 months, grounding herself physically when the information got too heavy. "What is it?" she said. "Your mother," Min Jae said. "Vanessa Bennett." The name landed in her chest like a stone into still water. "She didn't just know about Holloway's operation," he said. She's been an active participant in it for the last 8 years. The window glass was the only thing keeping Nia upright. She did not say anything. She could not locate words in the specific way you cannot locate something in a room that has just had all its furniture rearranged in the dark. The shapes were wrong. The distances were wrong. The thing she was reaching for was not where it was supposed to be. "Nia, keep talking," she said. Her voice came out flat. Not controlled. Flat. The way a surface goes flat when everything underneath it has been removed. "Holloway brought your mother in deliberately. 8 years ago, approximately 3 years before your father died, Vanessa Bennett became aware of the financial operation. We don't know yet whether she discovered it independently or whether Holloway told her." A pause. "What we know is that she made a choice. She didn't go to your father. She didn't go to attorneys. She negotiated her own arrangement with Holloway, a separate account structure, a percentage, protection for her own assets in the event the operation was ever exposed." Nia's hand against the glass had gone white at the knuckles. "She knew," Nia said, "while he was alive. She knew what Holloway was doing to his business, and she said nothing." "For 3 years," Min Jae said. "Yes." The morning light was the color of dirty concrete. Below, the city was beginning its ordinary morning. Delivery trucks, early commuters, the indifferent machinery of a place that did not pause for private catastrophe. She watched a yellow cab make a left turn 43 floors below and felt the profound, almost physical absurdity of that. The cab, the turn signal, the complete normalcy of a world that was continuing without any acknowledgement of what was being dismantled up here. "And my father's death?" she said. The pause on Min Jae's end was 1 second too long. "We don't have direct evidence connecting your mother to the toxicology suppression," he said carefully. "What we have is a payment from Holloway's network to her separate account 2 weeks after Lawrence died. A significant payment, larger than her standard percentage." The implication did not require elaboration. She heard it anyway, fully and completely, the way you hear something you have been unconsciously afraid of for years and have finally been given permission to name. Her mother had watched her grieve, had sat beside her at the funeral, had held her hand during the burial and said, "He loved you more than anything, baby. Never forget that." Nia pushed off from the window and walked to the bathroom and ran cold water over her wrists for 30 seconds. She looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. Her dress was wrecked. Her makeup was gone. Her eyes looked like they belonged to someone 10 years older and a great deal less patient. She turned off the water, went back to the phone. "I need 2 hours," she said. "Then I need to meet you." "Where?" "Not the Wacker building. Somewhere they won't think to look for me." She thought for a moment. "The parking structure on Illinois, level 4, bring everything you have on my mother." 2 hours, he said. She hung up, stood in the center of the hotel room in her ruined dress and her unbuttoned coat, the morning pressing gray against the windows, and made herself breathe through it. Slow. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the technique she had learned from a therapist 3 years into her marriage when she had begun to understand, at some level she hadn't yet named, that something in her life was structurally wrong. She had thought it was her. She had spent money on therapy working through the specific anxiety of a high-functioning woman who believed something was wrong but couldn't locate the source. She had done the work. She had built the vocabulary. She had learned to name her fears and examine them. All of it had been the right work applied to the wrong problem. She stripped off the dress, showered for 7 minutes, dressed in the clothes she'd packed with tonight's aftermath in mind. Dark jeans, a black turtleneck, flat boots she could move in. She checked the journalist contacts Minji had given her. 2 of the 3 had already begun the publication process. The first story would be live within the hour. She read the early draft on her phone. It was accurate, precise, and brutal. It named the shell corporations. It named the transfer amounts. It named Adrian Cole. It did not yet name Marcus Holloway. That was the second story, pending legal review. It did not name Vanessa Bennett. Not yet. She put the phone in her jacket pocket and left the hotel through a side exit. The parking structure on Illinois Street was 4 blocks north and smelled like every parking structure in every city. Oil and concrete and the specific chemical ghost of 10,000 cars. She took the stairs to level 4. Minjae was already there, leaning against the hood of a car she didn't recognize, a folder in his hand. 2 of his people were positioned at the stairwell entrances. He looked at her when she came through the door, assessed her in one glance the way he always did, not invasively, but with the particular attention of someone who needed accurate information about the state of the people around him. "You're holding," he said. "I'm holding." She took the folder from him. "Tell me what I don't know yet," he told her. The specifics of Vanessa Bennett's arrangement with Marcus Holloway were organized across 11 pages. Nia read them standing up, her back against a concrete pillar, the fluorescent light above flickering at irregular intervals. She read them once quickly, and then went back and read the numbers again. 8 years. Her mother had been taking a structured percentage of money stolen from her own husband's business for 8 years. The account was registered in Vanessa's maiden name, a name Nia had not heard used in 30 years. It was held in a private bank in Nassau. Its current balance was just under $4 million. $4 million. The inheritance Nia had received from her father's estate upon his death had been $240,000, a number her mother and Holloway had described as the result of estate taxes, legal fees, and the poor performance of certain investment accounts in the years before Lawrence's death. Nia had accepted it. She had been grieving. She had not been in a condition to audit anything, and Holloway had been there, patient and thorough and grieving alongside her, managing every detail. She closed the folder. "The Kenilworth operation," she said. "Did your people move last night?" "They moved at 4 this morning. The property was occupied, but Holloway was home." A pause. "They couldn't access the interior." She looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means the founding document is still on the property. It means we need a different approach." He held her gaze. "And it means Holloway is aware that someone attempted to access his residence. He doesn't know who yet, but he will begin security measures immediately." "How long before he moves the document?" "If I were him, 24 hours, maybe less." She did the math. The legal route to the vault was 48 hours minimum. The Kenilworth approach had failed. The journalists had the corporate documentation, but not the founding paperwork that would close the chain of evidence and make the case airtight for federal prosecutors. Without that document, what they had was strong circumstantially and destructible legally. Holloway's attorneys, and he would have extraordinary attorneys, she had no doubt about that, would spend the next 6 months dismantling the corporate trail piece by piece. The offshore structures were specifically designed to be difficult to attribute. They could be done, but it would take time they did not have, because Holloway was already in a federal prosecutor's office rewriting the narrative. "There's another option," Minjae said. She waited. "Your mother has the document." Nia went still. Holloway gave her a copy 8 years ago as mutual insurance. If she ever moved against him, he had her on record as a participant. If he ever moved against her, she had the founding documentation that proved the operation predated her involvement. He paused. "It's in her house, specifically in the fireproof safe in her home office. My people have confirmed its location." "How did your people confirm its location?" A beat. "That's not a question you need the answer to right now." She let it go. "She'll never give it to me voluntarily." "No. he agreed. She won't. Nia handed the folder back to him. She turned and walked to the edge of the level, to the low concrete barrier that overlooked the street 4 floors below. Traffic moved. A delivery drone made its way down the corridor between buildings. Normal city morning. She gripped the barrier with both hands and looked at it all and thought about her mother. Vanessa Bennett was 61 years old and had been a beautiful and formidable woman for all of those years. She had grown up in Birmingham, Alabama, the daughter of a school teacher and a postal worker, and had arrived at Spelman College in 1981 with the specific hunger of someone who understood exactly what she was escaping and intended never to return to it. She had met Lawrence Bennett at a party in the fall of her junior year and had understood immediately what he was and what he would become and had loved him. Nia believed that still, even now, genuinely, in the way complicated people love the uncomplicated goodness in others. But Vanessa Bennett had also, always, operated with a private calculus that kept her own security above every other variable. It was the calculus of a woman who had watched her own mother have nothing and had decided, at a cellular level, that she would never be in that position. Holloway had known that about her. He had known it, and he had used it. The question was whether Vanessa had made one terrible calculation and lived with it, or whether she was something worse. Nia did not yet know the answer to that. She was not sure she could afford to wait to find out. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Adrian Cole. She declined it. 2 seconds later, a text. We need to talk. Not about last night. About something you don't know yet. It's about Marcus. Please. She stared at the text for a long time. Then she dialed Min Jae, who was standing 12 feet behind her. Adrian just texted me. He says he has information about Holloway. Min Jae was quiet for 2 seconds. Don't respond yet. Let me make a call. She waited. Watched the street below. A woman walked a dog. A food vendor was setting up a cart. The city assembling itself for a Thursday as if Thursday were not an extraordinary thing to be having. Min Jae came to stand beside her at the barrier, close enough that she could hear him without either of them raising their voices. My contact in Adrian's circle says he was contacted by Holloway last night. After the gala, they met at 11:30 at a private club on Rush Street. What does that mean? It means Holloway has already gotten to him. Whatever Adrian knows, Holloway now knows Adrian knows it. And Holloway has either bought his silence or offered him something. A pause. Or threatened him. You think the text is a trap? I think the text is Adrian doing what Adrian does, trying to find the option that costs him the least. He's caught between Holloway and you, and he's looking for a way to use whichever one he has more leverage with. Min Jae's voice was even and very quiet. He's not your ally, but he might be usable. How? If Holloway threatened him, he's scared. Scared people make decisions faster and with less calculation than they should. He looked at her. You know Adrian. You know how he processes fear. She did know. She had watched Adrian be afraid exactly twice in their marriage. Once when a major client threatened litigation, once when his father had a medical emergency, and both times he had defaulted to the same pattern. He got very still, and then he started looking for someone to blame the fear on, and then he started moving, fast, without checking whether the direction was right. He'll meet me, she said. Yes. And if Holloway has his phone monitored, he almost certainly does. She thought about it. The parking structure was quiet except for the ambient sound of the city below and the flickering light above. She thought about the document in her mother's safe. She thought about the federal prosecutor's office and Marcus Holloway's smooth, practiced voice composing her father into a criminal. She thought about 22 months of text messages between her husband and her sister, the kind of messages that a person writes when they believe absolutely in their own privacy and their own narrative. She thought about what her father would do. Lawrence Bennett would not have waited. He had been a man who understood that the worst thing about being on the right side of a fight was letting the other side set the terms. He had told her that at 18 when she had wanted to wait out a legal dispute with a contractor. Don't let them pick the ground, baby. If you know you're right, you move first. I'll meet Adrian, she said. Somewhere public. Somewhere that creates a problem for Holloway if he moves on it. She turned from the barrier. And while I'm doing that, I need someone watching my mother's house. Already arranged, Min Jae said. She looked at him. He was watching the street below with the expression he wore when he was 3 moves ahead and waiting for the current move to catch up. You arranged it already, she said. I arranged it at 4:30 this morning. He glanced at her sideways. I've been doing this for a while. She shook her head very slightly. Not disapproval. Something closer to the involuntary recognition of competence in a form she wasn't used to needing. They were walking back toward the stairwell when her phone rang. Not Adrian, not Min Jae's contact, not a journalist. Simone. She stopped walking, looked at the screen. The call rang once, twice, a third time. Min Jae stopped 2 paces ahead of her and turned. He looked at the phone, looked at her face. She answered, Simone. The sound on the other end was not words at first. It was breathing, ragged, the specific breathing of someone who has been crying for a long time and has not yet found the bottom of it. Nia. Her sister's voice was wrecked. Nia, I need you to listen to me. I know you don't want to hear from me right now. I know that, but I found something and A broken exhale. I found something in Adrian's things and I don't know what to do with it, and I'm scared. Nia was very still. What did you find? She said. A pause. The sound of Simone steadying herself, the specific effort of a person pulling themselves together for long enough to say something important. It's a document, Simone said. It looks legal. It has Marcus Holloway's name on it and Daddy's name and a date from 2001. And Nia, I don't understand all of it, but there's a section with your name in it. And mine. Her voice fractured again. And it's not good. Whatever it says, it's not good. Nia's hand tightened on the phone. Simone had the founding document, not their mother, not Holloway's safe, not a vault in the loop. Adrian had been given it, or had stolen it, or had found it. And Simone had found it in his things in the chaos of the night after the gala, when Adrian had presumably not been careful, when he had been scrambling, when his system for keeping compartments separate had briefly collapsed under the pressure of a night that had not gone remotely the way he planned. Where are you right now? Nia said. Her voice was steady. She needed her voice to be steady. I'm at the apartment, the one Adrian and I. Another fracture. He's not here. He left last night and he hasn't come back and his phone goes to voicemail and I've been here by myself since midnight and Nia, I'm really scared. Min Jae was watching her face. She turned to meet his gaze and she saw him read the situation in her expression, watched him understand it in real time, a slight shift in his posture, a decision made. Don't move, Nia told her sister. Don't touch the document. Don't call anyone else. I'm coming to you. Nia, I'm coming. She paused. Lock the door. She hung up. She turned to Min Jae. Change of plan. I heard, he said. He was already on his own phone, speaking in Korean, 2 quick sentences. He put it away. My people will be outside the building before you arrive. She's terrified and she doesn't understand what she has. I know, which means Adrian may already know she found it. If he contacts Holloway before I get there, then we have less time than we thought. He held her gaze. Go. I'll follow in 10 minutes. Don't let your sister call anyone. She was already moving toward the stairs. The morning had gone cold and flat and purposeful around her. She could feel the shape of everything converging. The journalists, the prosecutors, Holloway's calculated moves, her mother's silence, Adrian's desperate positioning, and now Simone alone in an apartment with a document she didn't understand that could either save everything or, in the wrong hands, destroy what remained. She hit the stairwell door and took the stairs fast, her boots loud on the concrete, her breath coming in the focused rhythm of controlled movement. 3 floors below her, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, different from last night's. New. She doesn't have what you think she has. Holloway switched it. What your sister found is a forgery designed to implicate your father. The real document burned in Kenilworth this morning at 5 a.m. You have nothing. Nia stopped on the landing between floors 2 and 3. Read the text again. Then a second text from the same number. And we have your mother. She stood absolutely still in the concrete stairwell with the sound of the city humming distantly above and below, the fluorescent light casting everything the color of nothing, and felt the specific sensation of a plan that had taken 6 months to build coming apart in her hands, like wet paper. She read the second text one more time. And we have your mother. She stood on that landing for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds to let the information exist without reacting to it. A discipline she had built over 6 months of sitting with unbearable knowledge and choosing every single time not to let the weight of it make her stupid. Then she moved, back up the stairs. Not down. She hit the level 4 door hard with her shoulder and came through it at a pace just short of running, her phone already dialing Min Jae before she cleared the threshold. He picked up on the first ring. "The document is a forgery," she said. "Holloway burned the original this morning. And someone just texted me that they have my mother." A silence of approximately 2 seconds. In Min Jae's silences, she had learned to read the quality of the thinking happening inside them. This one was not surprised. It was recalibrating. "The text," he said. "Same number as before." "Different number. New one. Send it to me." A pause. "The document burning. I'm getting confirmation from my Kenilworth contact right now. A controlled fire in the detached office structure at 0500. Local fire department responded. Recorded as accidental." His voice tightened almost imperceptibly. "He moved faster than I calculated. You said 24 hours. I was wrong." She was already walking toward his car, where she could see one of his associates at the driver's side door, head up, reading the change in her body language from 40 feet away and already reaching for the door handle. "The text about my mother," she said. "Is it credible?" "I'm checking." The sound of him moving, a door, voices in Korean. "My surveillance on the house." A pause, longer this time. "My person outside her house is not responding." Nia got in the car. "Talk to me," she said. "Give me 60 seconds. She gave him 45. Outside the window, the city moved in its ordinary morning configurations, completely indifferent, and she sat in the back of the car with her hands in her lap and her jaw set and her mind running the board the way her father had taught her to run every negotiation. Not from where you are, but from where the other person is trying to get you to be. And then working backward to find the move that gets you somewhere they didn't plan for. Holloway had the original document. Burned. He had anticipated the Kenilworth approach, possibly because his security had flagged Min Jae's people at 4 in the morning and he had moved immediately. He had gone to the federal prosecutors first, establishing his narrative before the press established theirs. He had a forged version of the founding document placed where Simone would find it, which meant he had access to Adrian's apartment, which meant Adrian was either complicit in this specific move or was being managed closely enough that it didn't matter. And now he had Vanessa. The question was what he intended to do with her. If Vanessa Bennett was simply a liability to be silenced, she would already be silent. The text was a message, which meant Holloway still needed something. He was not in a position to simply eliminate variables. The press was already moving. Federal documentation was already distributed. He was in a race to control the narrative before the narrative controlled him. And Vanessa was a piece he was using to slow Nia down. He wanted her to stop moving and start reacting. He wanted her scared and responding rather than advancing. She was not going to give him that. "Okay," Min Jae said. He was back in her ear, his voice carrying a quality she hadn't heard before. Clipped, the comfortable precision gone, replaced by something harder and more operational. "My person outside your mother's house is alive. Incapacitated. Holloway's people moved on the house at approximately 0630. Your mother was removed. We have a partial plate on the vehicle. It traces to a logistics company that connects to one of Holloway's domestic holding structures. Where would he take her?" "There are 3 properties I know of that he controls directly or through proxies in the metro area. I'm running them now." The sound of typing. "The most likely is a property in Wilmette, a commercial building that's been nominally vacant for 8 months. It has residential accommodation in the lower level." "How long to get there?" 25 minutes from your current position." A pause. "Nia, I need you to hear me on something." "Say it." "If we move on that building, we are not conducting a legal operation. My people can handle what's inside. But the moment we move, Holloway will know, and whatever window we had for managing this through legitimate channels becomes significantly narrower." His voice was level and direct. "This is the line. Once we cross it, the kind of fight we're in changes." She thought about her mother. Vanessa Bennett, 61 years old, who had made a catastrophic choice 8 years ago and had been living inside it ever since, and who was now in a commercial building in Wilmette because the man she had made that choice with had decided she was a liability worth managing. She thought about her father. How many people does Holloway have in that building? She said. Estimate 4, possibly 6. And your people? I have 8 in the city available right now, plus 2 already moving toward Wilmette. Then we're not crossing a line, she said. We're just going to get my mother. A silence. Then, okay. Call me when you have eyes on the building. I'm going to Simone first. I need that forged document. Even a forgery tells us something about what the real one said. 15 minutes, he said. Then I need you in a car heading north. She hung up and dialed her sister. Simone picked up before the first ring finished. Nia, I'm 7 minutes away. Has anyone contacted you? Adrian, anyone else? Adrian texted me 20 minutes ago. He said, don't talk to you. He said, her voice wavered, steadied. He said you're dangerous and that you've been working with criminals and that whatever I found, I should give it to him. Do not give it to him. I'm not. A beat. I didn't. I told him I didn't find anything. Nia registered something she hadn't expected. A small, sharp note of recalibration. Her sister, who she had written off as entirely captured by Adrian's narrative, had lied to him, had covered, had called Nia instead. Good, she said. I'll be there in 7 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone else. The car moved through morning traffic with the aggressive patience of Minjay's driver, who knew the city's patterns the way surgeons know anatomy. Where to press, where to move, where the system would give. 6 minutes and 40 seconds to the front of a glass and steel building in River North, a lobby with a doorman who read the situation in one look and made the correct decision not to interfere. 23rd floor. She knocked twice. The door opened and her sister was on the other side of it, and they stood looking at each other across a threshold for the first time without performance or audience or the specific management of an occasion. Simone looked terrible. She was still in last night's champagne gown, the fabric creased from a night of not sleeping in it properly, her hair pulled back with the inadequacy of someone who had done it in a mirror with shaking hands. Her eyes were swollen. The ring was still on her finger. Nia looked at her and felt something that was not forgiveness. It was too early for forgiveness, and she was not in a position to manufacture it, but was something more complicated than its absence. The specific grief of looking at a person you have known your entire life and understanding that both of you have been living in a story that was built to destroy you. Where is it? She said. Simone turned and led her into the apartment. It was a rental, sleek and impersonal, the kind of place that communicated aspiration rather than habitation. On the kitchen island, beside a coffee mug and an opened laptop, lay a manila envelope. Nia pulled on a pair of thin gloves she had in her jacket pocket, a habit she'd developed in the last 3 months, and opened it. The document inside was 14 pages. Clean. Professionally formatted. The date at the top was March 2001, and the header read as an operating agreement for an entity called Meridian Capital Development LLC. Her father's name. Marcus Holloway's name. Language she recognized from corporate formation documents, except threaded through it, in the kind of language that looked technical until you knew what to look for, was a structure that redirected founding assets into a sub-entity that only Holloway controlled. It was a good forgery. She could see that immediately. The font was correct, the paper stock had been aged, the formatting matched documents from that era. Someone had spent serious time on this, but she had read enough of her father's actual documents in the last 6 months to know his signature. The one on page 14 was close. It was not right. She photographed every page with her phone. Did you read it? She said. Some of it. Simone sat down on the kitchen stool on the other side of the island. The part with our names, there's a beneficiary clause. It says that in the event of Lawrence Bennett's death, his daughter's inheritance would be, she stopped. Would be absorbed into the operating entity, Nia finished. That's what it says. Is it real? No. She set the last page down. It's designed to make it look like our father signed away our inheritance voluntarily. If this went to a federal prosecutor alongside Holloway's statement, it would support his version. It would make Lawrence Bennett look like the architect of his own family's dispossession. Simone's face moved through something she seemed to not have a word for. Marcus Holloway, she said. He was at the funeral. He was at every birthday dinner until I was 24. He sent me a card when I graduated. I know. He killed Daddy. It wasn't a question. Nia looked at her sister across the island. We don't have that confirmed yet. What we have confirmed is enough. She paused. Simone, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight. Her sister met her eyes, held them. Adrian, Naya said. How much does he know? A long pause. More than he told me. A lot more. She exhaled through her nose. I think he knew about the financial stuff. Not all of it, but he knew something wasn't right with the estate, and he chose not to look at it. She looked at her hands. The ring caught the light. I think he chose not to look at a lot of things. Because Holloway was paying him to not look. Simone didn't answer. She didn't have to. Nia's phone went off. Min Jae, I have eyes on the Wilmette building, he said when she answered. 6 individuals confirmed inside. Your mother is in the lower level. She appears unharmed. We have thermal imaging and audio. A pause. We're ready to move. But Naya, there's a development. What? Holloway is in the building. She went still. He's there himself. He arrived 11 minutes ago. Private vehicle. Came in through the rear entrance. Min Jae's voice had gone to its flattest, most operational register. He's in the same room as your mother. She was already moving toward the door. I'm 20 minutes out. Nia, his voice stopped her. He has a lawyer with him, and the lawyer has a document case. A beat. I think he's there to get your mother to sign something. She understood immediately. A prepared statement. An affidavit. Something that would formalize Vanessa's participation in his version of events. Or, more likely, something that would place the full liability of the conspiracy on Vanessa herself. The visible face. The one whose name appeared on the domestic accounts. Holloway cleaning his own hands by pressing them into her mother's back. How long does he need? She said. Not long. If she signs, he's done with her. After that, she becomes only a liability. The implication was not subtle. Don't move until I'm there, she said. Nia, I need to be there. Don't move without me. A pause. Professional. Assessing. You have 18 minutes. She turned to Simone. I need you to stay here. Lock the door. Don't answer it. Don't call Adrian. Where are you going? To get Mom. Simone stood up. I'm coming. You're not. She's my mother too. Her voice cracked on it and then steadied. And whatever I did, whatever I let happen, I'm not sitting in this apartment while you... She stopped. Reset. I'm coming, Nia. Don't argue with me. There's no time. There was no time. Nia looked at her sister for 1 second, the length of a full breath, and made the decision. Stay behind me, she said. Do exactly what I say. Don't speak unless I tell you to. They went. The car moved north through morning traffic, faster now. Min Jae's driver pushing gaps in the flow with the controlled aggression of someone operating on a deadline he understood precisely. Nia sat in the back with Simone beside her, and her phone in her hand and her eyes on the road, running the variables. Holloway in that room with Vanessa and a lawyer and a document. 6 of his people in the building. 8 of Min Jae's outside. A thermal image of her mother sitting in a chair in the lower level of a vacant commercial building in Wilmette on a Thursday morning while a man who had stolen her husband's life and her daughter's inheritance pressed a pen into her hand. Her phone buzzed. Min Jae again. She's not signing, he said. The quality of the information in his voice was different. Something approaching something she couldn't quite name. He's been in there 12 minutes. Our audio is picking up elevated voices. She's refusing. Nia closed her eyes for 1 second. Her mother, who had made every catastrophic choice available to her and had made them deliberately and had watched her family grieve in the wreckage of those choices. Her mother was sitting in that chair refusing to sign. She did not know what to do with that. She filed it later. 11 minutes out, the driver said. Tell your people to hold, she told Min Jae. Holding. The building appeared at the end of a commercial street that had been industrial and was trending toward redevelopment. The particular in-between state of blocks that had ceased to be one thing and had not yet become the next. 3 stories, brick, windows that had been covered with interior boarding. A parking area in the rear. No visible signage. The car stopped 1 block short. Min Jae was standing on the sidewalk in the gray morning air, his jacket on, 2 of his people behind him. He looked at Nia when she got out of the car, and then he looked at Simone, and he made a decision about that without commenting on it. 3 entries, he said, front, rear, and a side utility entrance on the north face. Holloway's vehicle is in the rear lot. His driver is with the vehicle. He held out his phone, a screen showing a thermal layout, green shapes on black, the building's interior rendered in heat. Your mother is here. He pointed to a shape in the lower level, a figure in a chair, alone. 2 shapes standing near her. Holloway and the lawyer. His other 4 people are distributed across the ground floor. Nia studied the screen. The lower level. One way in? Stairwell from the ground floor interior, and a utility access from the north side. It comes out into a corridor 20 feet from the room your mother is in. He paused. My people take the ground floor simultaneously. You go through the utility access. With me, she said. With me. He pocketed the phone. His eyes moved to Simone. She stays with the car. She's not, Simone started. You stay with the car, Nia said. Not a discussion. If this goes wrong, I need someone who isn't inside that building. Do you understand me? Her sister's jaw was tight. She understood. She hated it, and she understood it. If I don't hear from you in 20 minutes, Simone said, I'm calling every journalist in the city. Give me 15, Nia said. She turned to Min-jae. He was already moving. The north utility entrance was a steel door with a lock that one of Min-jae's people addressed in under 40 seconds. Inside, a corridor smelling of abandonment and old concrete, conduit pipes running along the ceiling, the fluorescent light of a building that had been maintained on a skeleton budget. They moved fast and quiet. Min-jae ahead of her, a second associate behind, all 3 of them moving with the particular economy of people who had made a decision and were now executing it without the luxury of second-guessing. Nia was not a person who operated in spaces like this. She was a brand strategist from Atlanta who had built a company from a kitchen table and given speeches at industry conferences and worn a burgundy dress to the most controlled detonation of her marriage. She was not trained for what was happening in this corridor. She was also Lawrence Bennett's daughter, and Lawrence Bennett had told her more than once that the most dangerous thing a person could do in a fight was confuse the kind of fight they were in. This was not a negotiation. 30 feet, 20. The corridor turned, and the door at the end of it had light underneath it and sound. 2 voices, one of which she recognized immediately despite not having heard it in this register before. Her mother's voice. Heated, refusing something. And Marcus Holloway's voice, patient and steady and relentless, the voice of a man who believed that everyone had a number and that time and pressure would reveal it. Min-jae's hand went up, stopped them. He held up 3 fingers, looked at Nia, looked at the door. Above them, they could hear the sound of the ground floor operation beginning, movement, voices in Korean, the controlled chaos of 8 professionals taking a space that 6 people weren't prepared to defend against a coordinated entry. The voices on the other side of the door sharpened. Holloway had heard it too. Min-jae took the door. It was not like movies. There was no slow dramatic entrance. The door came open fast and they moved through it into a low-ceilinged room with exposed concrete walls and 2 fluorescent fixtures and a folding table with papers on it. And Marcus Holloway was already on his feet, and his lawyer was against the far wall with a document case clutched to his chest, and Vanessa Bennett was in a chair with her hands in her lap and her spine rigidly straight, and her expression was the thing Nia would remember longest from that morning. Not fear, not relief, something rawer and harder than either. The face of a woman who had been sitting in that chair refusing to yield, and who had just watched her daughter come through a door she did not expect any human being to come through, and who could not, in that moment, compose it into anything manageable. Marcus Holloway was 63 years old and had maintained the appearance of vigorous, distinguished prosperity across a long career of meticulous theft. He was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore a pocket square on a Thursday because he considered his own presentation a matter of professional discipline. He stood on the far side of the folding table and looked at Nia Bennett across it, and his face did something she had never seen it do in 30 years of knowing him. It went uncertain. Nia. His voice carried its trained warmth automatically, the reflex of a man who had spent decades using interpersonal ease as a professional tool. This is not what it looks like. Sit down, she said. Now listen, Marcus. Her voice was completely level. Sit down. He did not sit down. He was calculating. She could see it, the rapid assessment behind his eyes, measuring the room, measuring Min-jae, measuring what options remained. His people on the ground floor were no longer a viable resource. That sound had been unmistakable. You have nothing, he said. The warmth was gone. Underneath it was something colder and considerably more honest. The original documentation was destroyed this morning. What you distributed to journalists is corporate records that my attorneys will dismantle in federal court in 60 days. He straightened his jacket, the gesture of a man who defaults to composure when composure is the only weapon left. You're a very smart woman, Nia. You've been smart throughout this. But smart and winning are different things. You're right, she said. They are. She reached into her jacket and placed her phone on the folding table, screen up. On the screen, the photograph of the forged document she had taken in Simone's apartment 40 minutes ago, already transmitted and received. She watched him look at it, watched him understand that she had it, that she'd had time to analyze it, that Simone had not given it to Adrian as he had presumably arranged. A forgery you planted in Adrian's apartment, she said, which means you had access to Adrian's apartment, which means your attorney over there. She glanced at the man against the wall, who had the appearance of someone who had signed up for a document signing and arrived at something substantially different, drew up that document, which means he's the maker of a fraudulent legal instrument, which is a federal crime that has nothing to do with offshore accounts or corporate structures. She looked back at Holloway. Your lawyer is looking at 5 years minimum, and I imagine he did not agree to 5 years when you brought him here this morning. The attorney made a sound. Holloway turned to look at him. The attorney set the document case on the floor. Marcus, he said, his voice carefully evacuated of everything that might constitute a side. I think we should... Don't, Holloway said. I think we really... I said don't. But the control was fracturing. Nia could see it in the specific quality of Holloway's stillness. The stillness of a man who has spent 14 years managing an extraordinarily complex operation through precision and foresight, and who is encountering for the first time a morning that is not going according to any version of the plan. She came around the table toward her mother. Vanessa Bennett looked up at her as she approached. Her mother's hands were in her lap, still. No visible restraint. She had been held here through the implicit threat of what Holloway's people represented, not through physical force. Her hair was perfect. Her posture was perfect. Vanessa Bennett would maintain her posture in a burning building. Her eyes, when they met Nia's, were not. Can you stand? Nia said. I've been able to stand for 61 years, her mother said. Her voice was steady and scorched. She stood. Nia turned back to Holloway. He had not moved. Min-jae was positioned between him and the door with the quiet authority of someone who did not need to perform the threat he represented. Here is what happens now, Nia said. My mother walks out of this room. Your attorney walks out of this room. You stay here until the people I've already contacted in the U.S. Attorney's office arrive, which will be, she checked her phone, approximately 9 minutes. You haven't contacted the U.S. Attorney, he said. I contacted them at 6:58 this morning, she said. Before I knew you had my mother. After. It didn't change the call. She held his gaze across the folding table. The corporate documentation the journalists have is sufficient to open an investigation. The toxicology suppression record is sufficient to open a second one. The forged document connects your attorney to a federal crime and gives prosecutors a cooperative witness in the next 15 minutes. She paused. And the financial records from the Nassau account will be transmitted to federal investigators in... She looked at her phone again. 6 minutes. Those records connect directly to you through a structure your attorneys can't dismantle because the person who built it has already agreed to cooperate. Something moved across Holloway's face. A crack. The first real one. Who? He said. She said nothing. He said it again, louder. Who? She picked up her phone from the table, turned to her mother. Let's go, she said. And that was the moment Marcus Holloway, 63 years old, 14 years of constructed invisibility, the man who had dismantled Lawrence Bennett's empire piece by piece and wept at his graveside, made the only move he had left. He reached across the table, not for a weapon. For the document case the attorney had set on the floor. Something inside it, something she hadn't accounted for, something he hadn't accounted for, something he was pulling out with both hands, and a desperation she had not seen in him before. So a hard drive, small and black, the kind that fits in a jacket pocket. And he looked at her across the folding table with 14 years of careful construction collapsing around him and said, "This ends everything you think you have, every account, every name, every transaction your Korean friend traced." His thumb moved toward a small mechanism on the casing, encrypted and wiped in 4 seconds. "You want to stop me? You have 4 seconds." Min Jae moved, not toward Holloway, toward the hard drive. It was 3 steps, and it was very fast, and it was not clean. Holloway pulled back hard. The table went sideways with a crash that filled the low-ceilinged room, and the two men collided at the edge of it in the graceless, urgent way of people who are not fighting, but are fighting over something, which is a different and more desperate thing. Nia grabbed her mother's arm and pulled her back toward the wall. The attorney flattened himself into the corner he'd already chosen. The fluorescent light above swung slightly from the table impact, throwing the room's shadows in slow rotation. Min Jae's hand closed over the hard drive. Holloway's thumb hit the mechanism. The indicator light on the casing flickered once, then went dark. Both men went still. Min Jae looked at the device in his hand. His expression was unreadable. Then he turned it over, and on the underside, where the battery contact should have been, there was nothing. A clean rectangular cavity, empty. He looked at Holloway. "Dead on arrival," he said. "The battery was removed when my people were in this building at 4 this morning. They couldn't get the document. They got everything else they could find." Holloway's face did the last thing she had ever expected to see it do. It simply stopped. All the management, all the controlled warmth and the professional composure and the decades of practiced human performance, it stopped, the way a machine stops when the power is cut, all at once, without gradual diminishment. He sat down on the floor. Not in a chair. On the floor. Like his legs had simply declined to continue. Nia looked at him there. Marcus Holloway, sitting on a concrete floor in a vacant building in Wilmette, on a Thursday morning, 63 years old and completely empty. She felt nothing she expected to feel. Outside, she could hear vehicles arriving. The U.S. Attorney's Office had sent 2 investigators and 4 federal agents. They came through the front entrance, which Min Jae's people held open for them, and they moved through the building with the specific, unhurried efficiency of people who had been briefed and were executing a plan that was already made. Nia met the lead investigator, a woman named Carver, late 40s, the kind of face that had heard every version of every story and maintained its precision anyway. In the corridor outside the room where Holloway was sitting on the floor. "Ms. Bennett," Carver said. She did not extend her hand. She was holding a tablet and looking at Nia with the assessing attention of someone taking inventory. "We've been building a parallel investigation on the Meridian Capital structure for 14 months. What you distributed this morning filled 3 gaps we hadn't been able to close." "The toxicology suppression," Nia said. "That's the component that changes the charge structure significantly." Carver's voice was factual and even. "I want to be direct with you. We will pursue what the evidence supports. I can't make promises about outcomes." "I'm not asking for promises," Nia said. "I'm asking you to look at all of it, every layer." "That's what we intend to do." Carver looked past her toward the room. "Is he ambulatory?" "He's on the floor." A beat. "All right." She moved past Nia into the room. Nia stepped back into the corridor. Her mother was there, standing against the wall with her arms crossed over her chest and her chin up in the posture she had maintained through every difficult moment of her adult life. The attorney had already been separated by 2 federal agents and was talking very quickly to someone on his phone. Min Jae came out of the room and stood beside Nia. His jacket was pulled at the shoulder from the collision. He straightened it without comment. They stood in the corridor and said nothing for a while. "The hard drive," she said finally. "There was data on it," he said. "My people imaged it at 4:15 this morning before removing the battery. It's being processed now." He paused. "It contains 14 years of internal records, transactions, communications, the names of every person Holloway paid, including the medical examiner's office contact who closed the toxicology request. She absorbed this." "That's enough," More than enough. She looked at the wall across from her. Concrete. A crack running from floor to ceiling, old and settled. The building had been standing long enough to develop its own damage and learn to hold it. The founding document, she said. The real one. It's actually gone. It's gone, he confirmed. But it doesn't matter anymore. What the hard drive contains is direct. It doesn't require the founding document to establish the chain. He glanced at her. He burned it thinking it was the keystone. It wasn't. He didn't know what you'd done at 4 a.m. No. She allowed herself one breath of something that was not quite relief, but was adjacent to it. The particular exhale of a person who has been holding a structure together through sheer concentration and has finally felt the external supports engage. Then she turned to her mother. Vanessa Bennett met her eyes. The chin was still up. The posture was still there. But something behind it had shifted. Some interior arrangement that Nia could feel more than see, the way you feel a change in atmospheric pressure before you can name it as weather. We need to talk, Nia said. I know, her mother said. Not here. No, Vanessa agreed. Not here. They left the building together, the three of them, Nia, her mother, and Min Jae walking a few paces behind with the instinctive consideration of a man who understood which conversations required distance. Outside, the morning had lightened slightly, the cloud cover thinning at the edges, the gray acquiring a quality that was not yet brightness, but was moving toward it. Simone was still by the car. She saw them come out of the building and her face did something complicated and unresolved. Her eyes went to Vanessa first, checking, confirming, and then she let out a breath she'd been holding for 15 minutes, and it shook on the way out. She didn't cross to them. She waited. That waiting, Nia thought, was the most adult thing she had seen her sister do in years. They drove back to the city in 2 vehicles. Nia rode with her mother. Min-jae took the second car with his people. Nobody spoke for the first 10 minutes. The highway unrolled north to south under a November sky that was deciding, slowly, what kind of day it was going to be. Nia spoke first. How long did you know about the toxicology suppression? Her mother was looking out the passenger window. I didn't know he had done that, she said. I knew he had paid someone. I didn't ask what for. A pause. I told myself I didn't know. But you suspected. A longer pause. Yes. Nia kept her eyes on the road. And you said nothing. No. The word was small and accurate and carried the weight of everything it was declining to dress up as something more forgivable. Why, Nia said, not with heat. The heat had burned through somewhere in the last 12 hours, and what remained was something colder and more structural. The genuine need to understand the architecture of a decision that had cost her father his legacy and her family 14 years. Vanessa turned from the window. She looked at her older daughter's profile, the cheekbones, the set of the jaw, the specific quality of attention that had always been more Lawrence than Vanessa and had always, if she was honest, made her feel both proud and faintly accused. Because I was afraid, she said. Because I had watched your father build everything, and I had been beside him for every year of it, and I had nothing that was mine. Everything was Bennett construction, Bennett properties, Lawrence's vision, Lawrence's name, Lawrence's risk. Her voice was steady and unbeautiful. And when Marcus came to me and told me what he had been doing, I was furious. I was. But then he showed me the account he had set up. And I thought, for the first time in 27 years, I thought, this is something that cannot be taken from me. Not by a lawsuit, not by a bad quarter, not by anything. And Daddy, Nia said. Your father was a good man, Vanessa said. He was a genuinely good man, and I loved him, and I chose the money. She said it without flinching, the way people say things they have spent years not saying and have finally decided to put down. I have to live inside that. I'm going to live inside it for the rest of my life. The highway moved under them. The federal investigators are going to want to talk to you, Nia said. I know. You're going to have to cooperate fully. I know that too. Everything, Mom, every account, every conversation, every amount. Yes. A beat. I have an attorney, a real one. I've had one retained for the last 3 months, since I understood that you were building something. She looked at Nia's profile. I've been preparing a statement, Nia glanced at her, since 3 months ago, since I found the same documents you found, in a different place. Vanessa's hands were in her lap, folded. I knew it was coming. I didn't know when. I thought I might be able to... She stopped. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong about most of it. Nia returned her eyes to the road. She thought about what Min Jae had said about her mother in the Wacker building, that Vanessa had been an active participant. She thought about the account in Nassau and the $4 million and 8 years of Sundays at a kitchen table helping her daughters grieve a man she had watched be stolen from. She thought about the specific human capacity to hold contradictory things, love and betrayal, grief and complicity, the genuine and the corrupt, inside the same life without resolving them. She did not forgive her mother that morning. She was nowhere near forgiving her mother, but she understood with a clarity that was its own kind of grief that what her mother had done was not monstrous in the way of cartoons and simple stories. It was monstrous in the way of actual people, complicated, terrified, incremental, and completely real. The Chicago skyline appeared ahead of them, the towers rising gray and definite from the flat surrounding land. She drove toward it. The weeks that followed were not clean. Nothing that comes after a thing like that is clean, and anyone who has been through the institutional machinery of federal investigation and civil litigation and public exposure knows that the mess is not a temporary condition. It is the new condition, the one you live in while the official version assembles itself slowly from the wreckage. Marcus Holloway was arrested on federal charges encompassing wire fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and after the toxicology records were formally unsealed through an emergency legal motion filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office, charges connected to the death of Lawrence Bennett. That last charge took 6 weeks to formalize. Nia was notified by a call from investigator Carver on a Tuesday afternoon when she was sitting at her office desk looking at quarterly reports and not seeing them. And after she hung up, she sat for a while without moving and then called Min Jae. It's done, she said. I know, he said. I saw it come through. She didn't say anything else for a moment. Are you okay? He said. No, she said. Not today. A pause. Ask me again in a week. Okay, he said. She hung up and went back to the quarterly reports and didn't see them for another hour. The civil process around the Bennett estate took considerably longer. Asset recovery across multiple jurisdictions, the unwinding of 14 years of offshore structures, the forensic accounting that established what had existed and what had been taken, and what after legal fees and recovery costs and the ugly mathematics of long-term theft could actually be returned. The number at the end was not $40 million. It was not close to $40 million. Recovery was partial, the way it always is, the way the people who construct these systems intend it to be. But it was something. Adrian Cole avoided criminal charges by cooperating early and thoroughly with federal investigators in a way that Nia found simultaneously useful and contemptible. His business collapsed anyway. The public exposure, the civil suits filed by partners who had been drawing on his association with the Bennett name, the specific social mechanics of a city that is not large and has a long memory. He moved to Charlotte 8 months later. She did not hear from him again, and she did not look for information about him, because there are some doors you close and then you have the sense not to stand in front of. Simone stayed in Chicago. That had not been certain. In the weeks after the gala, after Will met, after the first wave of press coverage, Simone had been in a condition that Nia watched with the cautious, unwilling attention of a person who has decided to let someone they love find their own footing and who is standing nearby in case they fall. She was not okay for a while. She was not pretending to be okay, which was new, and which Nia took as an indicator of something genuine happening underneath. They had dinner together for the first time 6 weeks after the gala. Awkward, careful, the conversation moving like a person navigating a room they know has furniture in unusual positions. It was not repaired, but it was begun again, which is a different thing, and in some ways, a harder one. Vanessa Bennett's cooperation with federal investigators resulted in a formal immunity agreement that required full financial disclosure and restitution of the Nassau account balance. $4 million returned. She avoided prison. She did not avoid the rest of it. The public record, the names in print, the friends who called once and then didn't call again, the specific punishment of a life that has become its own verdict. She lived in the house in Kenwood that had been the family home, which was now considerably quieter than it had once been, and she called Nia on Sunday evenings, and Nia answered those calls about half the time, and that ratio, for now, was what it was. Min Jae's exposure in the operation created consequences he managed without apparent complaint, but that Nia understood were real. His relationship with certain business partners in the Chicago market was permanently altered. His name appeared in federal court documents in a manner that complicated some of his operations in ways she was not given the details of and did not press for. He was not someone who invited sympathy, and she had learned not to offer it. But there were moments in the months that followed when she looked at him and understood that the cost of what he had done was being paid in currencies she could not fully see. 3 months after Will met, on a Wednesday evening in February, when the city was frozen solid and the lake was a white plain under a sky with no depth, he took her to the rooftop of the building on Wacker Drive. The outdoor heating was running. The city spread south and west in its grid of amber and white, the river visible below as a dark seam through the illuminated pattern. They stood with their hands around coffee cups and looked at it for a while without talking. "You said you had particular feelings about what was done to my family," she said. "The first night, in this building." "I did." "You never told me what they were." He was quiet for a moment, not evading, choosing the way he always chose, deliberately, with the awareness that words, once given, change the atmosphere between people permanently. "My father built something," he said, "in Seoul, a company, 20 years of his life." He looked at the river below. His partner took it, not through anything criminal on paper, entirely through legitimate instruments, contracts he had signed and structures he had agreed to and language he hadn't fully understood. He paused. "My father died believing he had failed, believing the loss was his fault." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. He was 57. I was 19. She looked at his profile. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't tell you for the sympathy," he said. "I tell you because you asked, and you've earned the answer." He looked at her. "What Holloway did to your father, the structure of it, the use of trust as the primary instrument, the specific way it was built to be invisible, I recognized it. I have seen that shape before. I know what it costs." The wind moved across the rooftop. Below, a barge was making its slow winter passage on the river, its running lights red and white against the dark water. "How old were you?" she said. "When it happened to your family?" 19, he said again. "Old enough to understand it, not old enough to stop it." A pause. "It took me 9 years to become someone who could have stopped it. By then, there was nothing left to protect." She understood then why he had said yes. Not because of professional interest, not because of the network opportunity, not because of anything she had offered him. Because 19 years old and watching a theft you cannot stop and carrying that forward for the next decade into the person you become. That is a specific formation, and the people who carry it recognize each other in the particular way of people who have been shaped by the same kind of damage. "You're not still doing this for that," she said. "Are you? You're not? This isn't about your father." He considered this seriously. "No," he said. "My father has been properly mourned. This was about you, about a wrong that could still be corrected." A slight pause, and about the fact that I found the work genuinely interesting. She laughed. It surprised her. A real one, sudden, the kind that comes before the machinery of composure can intercept it. She put her hand over her mouth, and he looked at her with the expression she had come to understand as his version of warmth, the very particular and restrained version of it, and that expression on his face in the February cold was one of the things she would carry from that year into whatever came next. There was something she had not yet told him. She had been holding it for 3 weeks since the investigator had mentioned it in a follow-up meeting almost as an afterthought, a note in Holloway's internal communications referencing a 2012 incident in London, a contact identified only by a description and a date, a debt Holloway had noted in his records as leverage against Min Jae's family network. The incident was dated October 2012. A reference to Min Jae in a London street, an assassination attempt that had been disrupted by the intervention of an unidentified woman. The description in Holloway's notes was brief and purely practical. Unknown individual, black female, approximately 22 years old, college student, disrupted approach on Wacker Contact, London. She had been 22 in October 2012. She had spent a semester abroad at UCL. She had walked every part of that city in every kind of weather. She did not remember it. She had no memory of a specific incident, no rescue she had performed, no moment she could locate in that autumn that corresponded to what the file described. But London in 2012 had been a city of millions, and the kind of thing the file described, a moment of interference, a presence in the wrong or right place at the right or wrong time, was not always the kind of thing that registers as significant from the inside. She looked at Min-jae now. His face, the winter city behind it, the specific quality of a man who carried 14 years of patient and purposeful work in the lines around his eyes and the way he held his coffee cup. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. He turned to her. She told him. He listened without interrupting, which was his way. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looked at the city, looked back at her. "London," he said. "October 2012. Another silence. In it, something moved, a recognition, or the beginning of one. The adjustment of two people discovering that the distance between them is shorter and stranger than either of them had mapped. "I knew someone had intervened," he said. "I was never able to identify who." His voice was even. "I spent 2 years looking." "I didn't know I was doing anything," she said. "I don't remember it." "You wouldn't," he said. "From where you were standing, it would have looked like nothing. An uncomfortable situation on a street. Someone you helped without knowing why it mattered." She absorbed this. The improbability of it. The sheer structural improbability of a moment that had meant nothing to her, and had meant everything to the chain of events that led to a ballroom in Chicago 14 years later, to a parking structure and a vacant building in Wilmette, and a rooftop in February, with a city laid out below them like a map of everything that had happened and everything it had cost. "Fate," she said, not quite asking. "Coincidence," he said. "Very expensive coincidence." A pause. "Though I suppose the distinction matters less than the result." She looked at him. He looked at her. The wind moved between them and then past them, and then it was just the rooftop and the cold and the city doing what it always did, going on, indifferent and enormous, and full of 10,000 simultaneous stories, most of them invisible, most of them never known. She did not know what she and Min-jae were. She did not know what the coming months would make of two people who had been bonded by damage and precision and the very specific intimacy of conducting a war together. She knew that she was not the same person she had been the night she stood in the mirror of Suite 1, 407 in a burgundy dress. She knew that what had been taken from her family would never be fully returned. Not the years, not her father's living awareness of his own legacy, not the version of her childhood that would have existed inside a different truth. She knew that recovery and restoration were not the same word, and that the difference between them was where she was going to have to build. She was not afraid of the building. She had always known how to build. The city went on below them, amber and white and indifferent. Somewhere in it, Lawrence Bennett's name was in federal court documents that would eventually become public record. Not as a criminal, but as a man whose trust had been weaponized by someone who understood him completely and had used that understanding as a tool of theft. It was not the memorial she would have chosen for him, but it was the truth. And truth was what he had raised her to choose when the alternatives were easier and more comfortable and cost considerably less. She raised her coffee cup. Min-jae looked at it for a moment. Then he raised his own. They drank. The city expanded around them in every direction. The cold was absolute and clarifying, the kind of cold that strips a thing down to what it actually is. No excess, no insulation, no performance. Just what remains when everything that can be removed has been. What remained was this: two people on a rooftop, a city that would go on whether they watched it or not. A legacy that had been stolen and partially returned and would now be rebuilt in whatever form the next chapter allowed, by a woman who had learned at considerable cost that the difference between grief and power is simply which direction you let it move you. She turned from the edge. "I have a 6 o'clock tomorrow," she said. "With who?" "A new client. Small company. Good bones, wrong story. She pulled her coat tighter. That's what I do. I find the wrong story and I fix it. Minjae looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression shifted. Not warmth exactly, but its honest equivalent. Yes, he said. That's what you do. She walked toward the rooftop door. At the threshold, she stopped, turned back once. He was still standing at the edge, looking at the city, the coffee cup in his hand and the cold all around him, and the lights of everything that was still standing spreading out in every direction as far as the eye could reach. She held that image for exactly one breath. Then she opened the door and walked through it, into the warmth, into the next thing, carrying everything she'd learned and leaving nothing behind that needed to come with her. The empire was not restored. Empires don't restore. They transform into something smaller or something different, into the thing that survives when everything that was built on false ground has finally been cleared away, leaving only the bedrock, which had always been there, which had never needed anyone's approval or anyone's forgery to exist. The bedrock was Lawrence Bennett's daughter. She had always been enough. She was just, finally, the only one left in the room who knew it.